Thank you everyone for joining us today. We will be beginning our webinar at 2 after, just to let everybody get in here. Again, we will be starting our webinar at 2 after. We'll be starting our webinar momentarily. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, we'll be starting momentarily. We're allowing some people to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for our webinar today. I would now like to introduce Katie Brooks.
I'm Katie Brooks. I'm the CEO of the Bend Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome you all for joining us today for this webinar for our Impact Series here at the Bend Chamber. We have well north of 800 people participating in this webinar, so bear with us. This is the first time I pull something off quite this big, and we're all excited that you've decided to join us for today's program with Damon Runberg, who is our regional economist, who will be joining us here in a minute. A few things I wanted to share with you as we start today's webinar. And the first is that the Bend Chamber has really pivoted to readjust our services during the COVID crisis and step up in ways we hope you will find meaningful. These webinars we're going to be holding hopefully on a weekly basis for the foreseeable future, trying to bring you relevant information about how to get access to funding, what's going on in the economy, who has answers on the COVID virus and the health impacts, and get you a direct line to people with the answers. And so watch for announcements for upcoming Impact Series. This series today is sponsored by the Oregon Community Foundation, and I'll be introducing Julie Gregory here in a moment. But before I did that, I wanted to share some information of what we're doing here at the Chamber. For those of you who have not seen it yet, we have a new website up. It's called centraloregonsos.com. It's best if you just enter that URL directly into your search engine. And it has 3 different sections. It's an aggregation of all sorts of information on finding funding, resources, information, and connections. One section is for employers. It takes you down through a menu of where you can be applying for money and getting information. The other one is for employees that will help connect you to unemployment registration and other good information. And then another one is entitled Community Help. And this has been a joint effort between us and OSU Cascades, and a shout out to Facebook for a small grant to get it up and running. We've had good input on it so far, and would appreciate any feedback you might have on its usefulness and maybe what's missing. So that's centraloregonsos.com. In addition to this, the Chamber is also holding webinars, several of them, including these impact series. We're also holding some webinars for our young professionals and keeping the leadership series up and running, especially during these tough times. There are a lot of folks with some good information. Mo Carrick has one coming up on the 27th on building a good team through situations that are difficult and how to lead in times of uncertainty, and that's up on your screen now. Invite you to join those as well if you find them useful. So, as I said, we're also working with a lot of other folks in the community to identify, is there other funding streams that are available to get directly to employers and to employees in the Central Oregon community. And we are working with groups who are trying to stand up funds, get grants, et cetera. And I know the Oregon Community Foundation is starting a fund. It'll be up and running tomorrow for small businesses as well, grants and small loans. So know that there are a lot of us out here trying to do what we can, especially for these first 30 to 90 days out when there's so much uncertainty, and trying to get money in the hands of people who need it and information to you as well. So with that, I would like to introduce Julie Gregory. She is with the Oregon Community Foundation, who is sponsoring today's webinar. And we're grateful for the partnership with OCF and all you're doing for our community. I'm going to hand it over to her for just a moment.
Thank you, Katie, and thanks for all the work the Chamber is doing to support our community. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you, sort of. I'm Julie Gregory, Regional Director for Central and Eastern Oregon for OCF here in Bend. And it's our honor to help support gatherings like this. This is a challenging and unprecedented time for Oregonians, and we're all in this together. So thank you for giving me a couple of minutes to share how OCF is helping support communities dealing with a public health emergency, economic turmoil, and dramatic threats to basic service delivery. So with input from a network of volunteers, community leaders, policymakers, and donors, OCF has moved quickly over the past week to provide resources to nonprofits to fill gaps in funding not yet met by the public or private sector. We understand that OCF must be here in the short term for this crisis, while also keeping an eye on long-term needs for community and economic recovery and resiliency. So this week, our board approved $2.2 million in funding for emergency relief services. In addition, our generous donors are stepping up by recommending grants from their OCF donor advised funds to organizations all over the state. So today, just really quickly, I want to tell you about two pooled funds we have created, both of which are open to donations on our website, oregoncf.org. Our devoted COVID-19 page is a great resource to stay up to date on our ongoing response. So the first fund is the Oregon Community Recovery Fund, which we launched almost immediately in collaboration with many partners. We've already begun deploying resources to community-based organizations at the front lines of the COVID-19 outbreak. Today, this fund has grown to about $5 million, with donations continuing to come in. In our county so far, OCF has made a $72,600 grant to Neighbor Impact and a $30,000 grant to United Way of Deschutes County. And as Katie mentioned, you guys are actually the first to hear about this second fund. Today, we are launching the Oregon Small Business Stabilization Fund. As you guys know, without immediate assistance to pay operating costs, many small businesses vital to our communities are closing their doors and laying off employees. And we wanted to provide a charitable resource to help nonprofit lenders cushion the impact of lost revenue until more state or federal resources are available. So this fund is seeded with a $300,000 investment from OCF and contributed to by businesses around the state. It will provide emergency capital to nonprofit community lenders, CDFIs, economic development districts, and economic development agencies for Oregon cities and tribes. The fund will increase these lenders' capacity to offer low interest and no interest loans to small businesses in rural and urban communities. It will be active for at least 6 months, and we'll be working closely with state and city partners to ensure that funds are well coordinated and deployed equitably across the state. So please don't hesitate to let me know if you have any questions. You can find my contact information on our website. And thanks again for this opportunity, and my sincere best wishes to everyone out there to be safe. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks, Julie. Really great stuff from a role in our community as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce Damon Runberg. For those of you who have been to us over the years, you've seen him. He's up there every year. Greatly appreciate his time today. Damon is a state economist with the Oregon Employment Department, covering Central Oregon and the Klamath Basin. He calculates the monthly employment and unemployment numbers and estimates for the area's counties. Additionally, Damon tracks various economic indicators that are critical to our economy, and we're really, really pleased that you're with us today. Damon, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Katie, and it is great to be here. Good afternoon. I am much more accustomed to seeing all of your smiling faces in person, but it is encouraging to know that we are all virtually here together. This might be the biggest audience I've ever spoken to, and it feels like I'm just speaking to Katie because she's the only one I could see right now. But I know you're all out there, and you're all staying home, hopefully, and you're all staying safe. And I want to just thank the Chamber of Commerce, the Bend Chamber of Commerce, for this opportunity, this platform, to get this really important information out to the community as things are changing really quickly, and there's a lot of interest in what's going on with our local economy and our state economy right now. Now, one thing I'll say before we get going is that most of our economic data that we have is what we call lagging data. So it tells us something about the past rather than details about the present or the future. So in most cases, our data that we have access to is lagged by a month or more. So for instance, next week I'll be releasing employment numbers for February of 2020. I mean, that sounds like ancient history now, doesn't it? And so we are scrambling as fast as we can to find and create economic indicators that can address the situation we're seeing today on the labor market in a much more timely fashion. And so you are all in luck because we are actually just released 2 hours ago information that is helping to quantify what we're seeing across the labor market right now. With that, Matt, can you go to the next slide? All right, thank you. And I've got Matt on the other end here controlling the slides for me, so you'll have to give us a little patience there. So first and foremost, I want to say let's not fool ourselves into thinking that we are dealing with an economic crisis. This is a human health crisis that needs to be addressed before we can recover economically. This is unprecedented in all of our lifetimes, unless you were around in 1918, which most of you probably were not. They definitely weren't doing Zoom conferences back in 1918, so that's fresh and new. The best thing we can do in this human health crisis is to stay home and stay healthy. But to do that efficiently, we need to get money in people's pockets. So we're not talking about stimulating the economy. We're talking about basic needs being met: shelter, food. And Congress and the Senate are on track. They passed this relief bill. I think they're calling it a stimulus bill, but honestly, it is a relief bill. This is gonna make it so that Americans, Oregonians, can actually meet those basic needs in the short period of time. So we're very thankful that this bill is passed. There's still it just recently passed, so there's a lot we are still learning about it as it comes out. But this is going to be a huge help to all of us across the country. And this will also help give people cash payments, not only the cash payments that we're talking about where every household gets cash, but also it's going to bolster unemployment insurance. And we'll get into the unemployment insurance in a second here. But it's really important for us to understand that the unemployment insurance system is limited in how much your weekly benefit is. And so this new federal aid package is going to really make that weekly payment quite a bit bigger for individuals. So as I discuss the economic realities that we are facing today, don't think for a second that I'm saying that we need to stop the social distancing or that we shouldn't be staying at home or ignore the stay-at-home order. That is our number one priority. The economic realities are something that is happening because of this human health crisis. And it is critically important for us to solve that, manage this crisis before we can ever consider solving anything that's happening to our local, our state, or national economy. And once again, we're thankful for these relief packages that are going through right now. So with that, I will do one last reminder of stay home, stay safe. We're in this together. But let's look at what the economic data is showing us right now. So Matt, if you could jump to the next slide. What we have is, we know that unemployment is rising really quickly. And before I get too far into what the data is showing us, I wanted to just do a quick update on some advice for all of you who are maybe business owners or folks who recently became unemployed or potentially might become unemployed. We've got some advice for you. So most workers are covered under unemployment insurance. This is a payroll tax that provides insurance coverage to subsidize people's wages when they lose their jobs. Do not think that there should be a negative stigma with filing for unemployment. It is an insurance program, not much different than your auto insurance or your home insurance or health insurance that you might have. So please, if you qualify for unemployment, apply and get those weekly benefits. You need that money. It's your money. You qualify for it. There are individuals, though, who do not get covered or qualify for unemployment insurance. The most notable and the most that people are talking about today are folks who are sole proprietors or self-employed. The vast majority of those folks don't qualify for unemployment insurance because they haven't paid into the trust fund. However, if you've had wages with a payroll job over the last 5 quarters, you likely do have some level of coverage there. So encourage anyone who is curious if they qualify or not, file a claim. Please do that for your sake and getting the money that you need to support your family. So if you were laid off and you aren't sure if you qualify for unemployment, it just doesn't hurt to apply. And if you're going to apply, we recommend that people use the online system. And at the very end of this presentation, there's some resources that are available, and there's going to be a link there to how to apply online. But we do encourage folks to use the online system because the call center is swamped right now. There are a lot of calls, and you'll see in a second what I mean when I say there's a lot of calls coming in. With that, also, I want you all to know that the Employment Department is doing everything in its power right now to divert resources to the Unemployment Insurance Division to get those claims filed as quickly as we can. It's all hands on deck for us in the Employment Department. So another thing that's really important for you all to know is that unemployment insurance recipients typically need to be what we call available for work, able to work, and actively seeking work. But there are now new temporary rules in place that greatly expand the flexibility of these requirements. So now it is quite a bit easier for folks to get these benefits, really opening the door for people to get those as quickly as possible. And there's details about that flexibility once again in that resource page at the end. Finally, before we get to the actual hard data, I'm getting a lot of questions about how much folks can expect to make when they're on unemployment insurance. We do on our website have a handy calculator on our Employment Department website where you can estimate your weekly benefit. I'll say that the weekly benefit is 1.25% of your base year covered wages, which sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo. It caps at $648 for the highest earners, and it is no less than $151 a week. So if you're curious, once again, that calculator, the link to that calculator is at the end of this slide deck. With that, let's move to the actual data. What are we seeing on the unemployment insurance claim side? So claim filing is not an indicator that we are accustomed to using. It is typically pretty boring. And if I showed you a time series over the last 10 years of what claim filing looked like, you'd sort of yawn at it. But we now are having to use this because of the timeliness, how rapid we're seeing the changes unfold before us. And so what we have before you here is initial claims filed in Oregon in the last 2 weeks. So you can see last week had 76,500 initial claims filed across the state of Oregon. Compare that to around 5,000 the week prior. A massive, massive increase in unemployment insurance claims. It's gutting and difficult to look at this information to understand the magnitude that we're seeing their jobs. Once again, they're likely losing their jobs for good reasons: social distancing, making sure that people are at home, we're not spreading this virus any further than it has to be. But the economic realities for people here in Central Oregon and across the state are very real. And so far what we've heard is that this current week that we're in now. So once again, we had nearly 77,000 initial claims filed for unemployment. We'll likely see a similar number, if not a little bit higher, once the week that we're current in is available. So we do have more detailed information available for roughly 23,000 of those claims. So about 30% of the claims we have detailed information about, because only about 23,000 of those claims have actually been processed. They've finished up being, those claims that were filed have actually moved through the system. And we're able to get information about the industries that are impacted and also the counties that are impacted of that subset of 23,000 of those processed claims. We're going to jump really quickly to looking at industry claim totals over the last 2 weeks. And you can see, and this is statewide, this isn't for Central Oregon. And I apologize, I don't like usually giving people tables of data to look at, but how quickly we're getting this information means I can't make things look super sexy for you. So you're getting a table of data, I apologize. But you can see that the leisure and hospitality sector saw the largest gain in initial claims processed for unemployment, over 10,700. So, about half of all the claims were in our leisure sector. Not too surprising there, as those initial impacts from the public health and safety measures that went into place really targeted our leisure sector, restaurants, hotels, etc. So not surprised to see the number of claims being filed out of that sector. And once again, I want to reiterate the point. These are the numbers coming of the number of claims that were processed. The actual number of claims that were filed is much higher. We just don't have the industry detail or the county detail. So it is also important to note that we saw increases in claims across the broad swath of all the major industry sectors. Really, no industry was exempt or excluded from what we saw over the last week with people losing their jobs. What surprised me the most with these numbers was that we saw sizable increases in manufacturing of folks filing for unemployment, as well as construction. This was a bit shocking, as in the short term, we had sort of anticipated that sort of before the stay-at-home order went into effect, that these businesses would have continued to be moving along with only minor impacts. But last week we did see notable impacts for those sectors, and we will probably see much larger impacts as the current week that we're in, that data becomes available. So we'll shift to, actually go back, Matt, go to the graph on Central Oregon. There we go. So this is the numbers we have for Central Oregon. Like I said, if we had been looking at number of unemployment insurance claims processed for a period of time, it's pretty boring looking. And you can see all of the weeks of 2020 up until this last week. In the last week, we jumped from, in Deschutes County specifically, 135 claims processed in the previous week to 1,322, an 880% increase in the number of unemployment insurance claims filed. Once again, the actual number of people who filed for unemployment in Central Oregon is likely magnitudes higher than that 1,322. We are only talking about those claims that were processed. Once again, many more claims were filed than were processed. And statewide, only about 30% of last week's claims were actually processed. And you can see the increase in both Crook and Jefferson counties wasn't nearly as severe, but still noticeable. And Central Oregon's impact was amongst the highest in the state as far as jump in unemployment insurance claims. That's not too surprising, as we have a pretty sizable tourism component to our economy, and knowing that the disproportionate share of those job losses in the last week sort of explains why Deschutes County got hit pretty hard. Other counties that got hit hard were around the Columbia Gorge, as well as coastal communities as well. So sort of what you'd expect, these areas that are highly leveraged into tourism. All right, so we'll move on from that. So we're gonna slide away from the unemployment insurance data. It is, like I said, it's a new indicator that we're using. We're gonna keep updating this information on a weekly basis now. So be ready to be more accustomed to talking about unemployment insurance filing data as a new economic indicator that we're using on a regular basis. What about jobs, though? Big picture. I mean, those were people filing for unemployment insurance benefits. It's a subset of all the people who lost a job. What are we expecting the job impact to be big term from this really terrible human health crisis? the best thing I could think of is, you remember when restaurants used to be a thing, right? It's only been a week since I've been to one, but it seems like foreign to us. If we go to the graph here, you can see our estimates right now. We're as quickly as we can trying to make employment estimates of the number of jobs in Oregon that are vulnerable to immediate and severe impact. Now, that's not to say all these jobs are going to have layoff, or there's going to be layoffs in all these industries, or all these jobs will have layoff events, but they are the jobs most susceptible to layoff and immediate, vulnerable, severe impacts. So we estimate around a third of all the jobs across the state of Oregon are susceptible to these immediate and severe impacts. Now, what share of these jobs are actually going to go away? At this point, it looks like somewhere between 80 to 90% of all restaurant jobs have been laid off. The numbers for hotels look really similar. Other sorts of industries, though, are saying that they're able to manage to keep some back office folks on payrolls, and have those people working from home. We also know that quite a few restaurants have kept a small staff available for take-home food, takeout, et cetera. So not all of these jobs are going to go away, but are a lot that are susceptible. Like I said, about a third of all the jobs in the state of Oregon. And excuse me. So no surprises here, though. The largest impacts that we're expecting are going to be in accommodation and food services. We've already seen that in the unemployment insurance filing data. It sort of affirms these estimates that we have, as well as retail trade. Obviously, our grocery sector is doing pretty well. They are some of the most essential personnel that we have right now, making sure that the food aisles are stocked, and we're getting all the goods that we need right now to stay home in a healthy manner. But other forms of retail are going to take a hit here. So your small businesses, your boutiques, your really any other car dealerships across the board, you're going to see impacts on the retail side outside of grocery. And if we move to the next slide, we actually, once again, I hate doing this, is like the ugliest chart I've ever made here, and I apologize, but I wanted you all to have an idea of the specific industry codes we're talking about when we say that they are vulnerable to immediate and severe impacts. And so it's going to be really tiny probably on your screen. You guys will all get a copy of this PDF sent to you so you can look yourself. But these are the industry codes that we highlighted as being in that sort of vulnerable to immediate and severe impacts category. On the left-hand side, we aggregated that up to sort of the broad super sector so you can see the actual raw number of jobs being impacted. I will point out that you'll see one column there, the total indirect, 63,100 jobs. This is an estimate that we made looking at, of the business spending of these businesses that are vulnerable to immediate and severe impacts, those sustain or support an additional 63,100 jobs across the state in their business spending in other industries. So there's going to be what we call sort of a ripple effect from these establishments that are the most affected. We're going to feel this across the rest of the economy. No one will be completely insulated from it. And if we move to the next slide, Matt, I made the similar estimates for us here locally in Deschutes County. Apologies to those in Crook and Jefferson counties. I haven't had time to make the region-wide numbers, but our estimate is that around 31,000 jobs are vulnerable to immediate and severe impacts here locally in Deschutes County. Once again, the vast majority of those are 11,000 of those are in the accommodation food service sector, likely already impacted. This isn't something that is going to happen. It likely has happened in that sector specifically. And you can see where the other impacts are going to be by our estimates. Once again, we have that indirect line there. So just under 4,000 jobs will indirectly be impacted by lack of business spending through the supply chain from these businesses. Now, this list ultimately should be bigger. We know, for instance, that we're already hearing stories of announcements of layoffs happening in manufacturing facilities here locally and across the state. So we are actually in the process of making another list of sort of those businesses that are susceptible in sort of a moderate and mild susceptibility to impacts. So we'll have sort of two different lists to try to quantify how big this thing might become or how susceptible Oregon's economy is to these shutdowns that we're seeing right now. It's also important to note that for us here in Central Oregon, about 40% of our total private employment is susceptible in this sort of immediate and severe category, compared to about a third statewide. The reason why we have a higher share of our employment locally that is susceptible is because of our reliance on the tourism economy. We have a larger tourism component than the state as a whole, and once again, that's sort of getting hit disproportionately hard in the short run right now. Those restaurants, those hotels, our resorts, Mount Bachelor Ski Resort up the hill, right? We know all of these sort of recreation impacts are happening immediately here locally. So let's move to the next slide. So what does it all mean? I don't have all the answers. Like I said, we are crushing through this information as quick as we can, trying to help inform the public. And speculation is not my job. I don't want to go too far on a limb. There are a few things that we can say when we look at some of the other indicators that we do have access to. So Matt, if you go to the next slide. We do have a few leading indicators that give us some insight, and we've heard that there's been a 90% drop in passenger flow at the Redmond Airport, significant reductions there as far as people flying in and out of Central Oregon. Once again, that's good. You shouldn't be flying here or flying out of here. We want people to stay at home and not spread this disease. But we do know that that's happening. It's an impact that we're seeing. Hotel occupancy has plummeted across Central Oregon, maybe lower than 10% right now in Deschutes County as far as occupancy. Traditionally, you have to quote Visit Bend on this one, but I think somewhere between 80 to 85% occupancy is what we typically expect this time of year. And then lastly, another leading indicator that we track to get an idea of what's going on is help wanted ads across the economy. Now, these are a bit lagging because we don't have last week yet. So we have 2 weeks old data for help wanted ads. Those are down 27% year over year. And we anticipate that once we get this last week, the week of the 15th data, there's going to be a sizable drop even beyond that 27% drop in help wanted ads, because there's likely not a lot of businesses out there that are hiring unless you're grocery right now. But these indicators should look bad. That's kind of the point. Once again, to reiterate that this is an intentional shock. We are shocking ourselves into staying at home and shutting the economy down so that we can prevent a much worse economic crisis if this virus is able to spread freely across Central Oregon, or the United States as a whole. So continue to do your part and stay indoors and stay home. Can we go to the next slide, Matt? See, did it jump? Yeah. Okay. So we had the longest expansion in U.S. history. And it was great. It was, we were saying for a long time, hey, when could this thing end? And the answer was, well, expansions don't die of old age. They die because of a reason. There's some shock to the system that happens. This was that shock. We don't call recessions in the employment department. That's not our job. But it's pretty clear that we are now squarely in a recession right now. So what does a recovery look like? Once again, we do not in the employment department make many forward-looking projections with this information, but we do have some counterparts and some friends in state government that do. So Josh Lehner, who's an economist with the Office of Economic Analysis, their group conducts most of our state budget and economic forecast. And Josh recently said this, I'll read the quote to you all, though I know you can all read it yourselves. The deeper the recession, the longer it persists, or the weaker the initial recovery, the more likely Oregon could be impacted to a larger degree. This would in parts be due to the goods producing losses that are more likely to come with the deeper consumer demand or longer lasting supply chain disruptions. However, the bigger impact will come from less migration and slower population growth. There's a lot there, and I'll unpack it a little bit for us. The moral of the story is what kind of recovery, or what's the shape of our recovery going to be like? If we were able to control the spread of this virus quickly and limit the effects to mostly the sort of leisure accommodations or a handful of other industries, there's a chance that our recovery looks more like this nice, looks like Josh made this graph in paint, and kudos to him. I've made many a graph in paint myself, but is it got to look more like this V-shaped recovery where we have a really significant impact, lots of jobs lost, but we can regain those really quickly because we're able to control this virus. That's one hypothesis, one potential. The other potential is that we are not able to control this virus in a very quick time. The economy has to stay shut down for an extended period of time. And this is what Josh was alluding to when he said the sort of consumer demand or the longer lasting supply chain disruptions, that's when we start to get what looks like this U-shaped recovery, where a future recession or the recession that we just entered into is sort of more devastating, it's longer lasting, and affects more industries and not quite so isolated to some of those leisure and accommodation sectors. So there's not a lot of insight that we could provide about what the future holds, because the answers are all in with us. It's how well we're able to follow the rules that are in place to make sure that we are following the recommendations to support our healthcare system, to stay at home, to really save the economy by sitting on our butts and watching TV. I guess sounds funny, right? But I think that that's ultimately what we need to take out of this is we don't get out of the penalty box until we can manage the virus. So we get out of the penalty box by watching Netflix and maybe doing some gardening at your house. And I know it's getting nice outside, so communicate with a loved one. I know it's hard; it's emotionally draining. We all feel isolated, and I do too. I'm there with you. And so stay safe, stay at home. We're going to open it up to questions in a second here, but before we jump to the questions, I want Matt to jump to the resource slide. There's a slide here, and once again, you're all going to get this PDF sent to you, the slide that has resources available. We have an FAQ there with unemployment insurance tips, especially ones related to COVID-19 related layoffs. I have a link to how to file a claim online. We have a link to the temporary rules for unemployment insurance benefits, so that flexibility I was talking about and allowing more people to get claims for unemployment. Also, just a little unemployment insurance 101 tips for you, as well as that calculator I alluded to at the beginning, which is the what is my weekly benefit calculator. So all those resources are available, and I know Katie in the chamber also has their website you can go to get that sort of SOS help as well. So with that, we can switch it over to questions now. Matt is going to read them to me, I think.
I am. And this is just a friendly reminder that we will be sending those out. Like Damon said, we'll be sending the slides out to those people. And just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this deck will be provided as a PDF. So Damon, the first question I've got is how much will the federal stimulus package impact the local economy? Officials say it could be 2 to 3 weeks before checks go out.
Yeah, it's going to be huge. And as much as people like to rip on Congress these days, they did something amazing and right. There's multiple layers to this. Like I said, I haven't read or unpacked the entire bill yet, but I think there's multiple layers that are really, really important from an employment and labor perspective. The first is going to be just the immediate cash payouts that are going to every U.S. citizen, every adult, so that $1,200 per adult, and then I think $500 for every additional child. That's going to help people in the short run actually pay rent, get food, etc. That's going to be really helpful. But that's a one-time payment at this point. So what's going to be really helpful is this I think the second element that's most important is there's going to be $600 additional per week for those on unemployment insurance. So you're going to get your state unemployment insurance, but you're also going to get $600 from the federal government on top of that a week. Details about that I still don't know, but that is huge to have that extra bolster to unemployment insurance. And then finally, I'm less clear on this part of the bill, but if I understand correctly, there's also a program for assistance for helping to pay wages for businesses who have to cut hours for workers. So that's going to allow people to stay on payrolls longer, which is great, and also help those businesses keep those folks on the payroll. One of the biggest concerns I have right now is if we lose all these people, if they lose their jobs, it's great that they're on unemployment insurance and they're getting cash in their pockets and getting some of these relief dollars. What happens for health care coverage, though? Most people in the United States receive health care through their employer. And so, some real concerns about the long-term effect of what happens when we have folks who start losing health coverage.
So I have another one, and you spoke into this just a little bit, but I think it's probably good for those people that just didn't completely look at it. But with 3 million filing for unemployment in a single week, is that any indication of how long recovery could take once the health crisis is over?
Well, like that graph we showed, that sort of handmade paint graph from the Office of Economic Analysis, we know it's deep and severe, right? We know this is a very steep downward line in job losses. That's clear. And yeah, over 3 million claims processed across the United States. Once again, the number is likely higher because that's the number processed. A lot of folks didn't get their claim fully processed in a week. There's a potential that if this goes deeper into other industries beyond sort of the service sector, and we know it already is, then it's going to be a longer recovery. We're definitely going to take longer to add the jobs back than we did to shut things down. The labor market's not like a light switch. It turns out we could turn the light switch off pretty easily. We just did that. But it's really hard to get the machine ramped back up again. So the anticipation of this being us being able to go back to life as usual as soon as these sort of COVID restrictions are taken off is unlikely.
Great. So I have another question in regards to if you are basically a full-time worker and yet your hours now have been cut, are you still able to apply for unemployment?
Yeah, you can get supplement if you have less coverage. And once again, excuse me, if you've lost hours, there's coverage for you there. So once again, if those people with those specific unemployment questions, that's just got to be covered in that sort of Unemployment Insurance 101 document that I linked to there for all those special unemployment insurance questions. And there's a lot of unique situations and circumstances out there.
So another question is, where can we find help for small business that do not have any employees? For example, construction companies with only a sole proprietor.
Yeah, so the sole proprietors, I alluded to this at the beginning a little bit, but most sole proprietors aren't covered under unemployment insurance. And that is, I think something we might learn coming out of this thing when we all are able to take a deep breath and recover a little bit is maybe our systems for how we create unemployment insurance systems should be expanded to include these folks, because this is a sort of an unprecedented event, and those folks are feeling a bit vulnerable and helpless right now. One of the great things that we're hearing coming out of the federal relief package is that there is some funding there specifically for sole proprietors or self-employed individuals. So you likely don't qualify for unemployment insurance. Once again, you might qualify for unemployment insurance if you do have payroll wages in the last 5 quarters. But if you don't, then it sounds like there's some federal relief coming for those sole proprietors.
So this goes back to a graph that I can put up, Damon, if you want, but it talks about what industry businesses are in the not immediately impacted category.
Yeah, you could throw up the list of the ones immediately. See the statewide one. You can do that. And once again, I apologize how tiny the numbers are or the words are on the right there. It was the only way I could fit it all in there so you could see who we thought were the immediate and severe impact group. Ultimately, the ones that aren't in there right away are sort of the obvious: grocery, retail, hospitals are not on the list. They're really not vulnerable at all right now. If anything, we're going to eventually need more and more of their help, and likely see employment growth on their side. Things that are not in the immediate, but we think might get hit soon, are some sort of other elements of healthcare are sort of in that moderate side. So a lot of dental facilities, for instance, as well as sort of outpatient or ambulatory care services and healthcare are not in the immediate impact, but we're going to definitely have them in sort of that moderate impact in the coming weeks. Other areas that we haven't seen a huge impact yet, but it likely will move that direction if this continues for any amount of time, like I said, is manufacturing. It's really difficult to social distance in a factory. Some are able to do it and do it effectively, and others are not. And so I think we're going to see sort of that be a limitation for many. And then eventually what's going to happen is we're going to have a demand shock where the goods or services produced by many of these companies will see the demand shrink dramatically. And so it will have more of an economic layoff and less of a sort of quarantine layoff event that might be happening there. Because I don't know about you, but there's not a lot of folks out there buying a lot of stuff right now if you're hunkered down at home. I will say I recently did buy a basketball hoop for my garage because I realized I needed something to do at home by myself. So Basketball hoops sound like a good thing right now.
So I have another one, and I think you spoke into this, but it's just basically what is going to be the cap for unemployment. And I know you did speak to that, but if you could just remind us what that looks like now.
Yes. So again, at the highest end, let me actually pull up the numbers here. So at the highest end, unemployment insurance for the state of Oregon caps at $648 a week. And with we have the new federal numbers that are coming out. It sounds like $600 in addition to that. So the new cap, if you added in the federal dollars that someone on unemployment insurance can get, is going to be over $1,200 a week, which is a pretty sizable wage, and it will definitely help replace income there. One thing I think might be helpful, I didn't really go over it on the slide, is to give some context of what you could expect your unemployment insurance payout would be. If you work full time at $12.50 an hour, you can and you have worked for over the last year at $12.50 an hour full time, you could expect your weekly benefit to be about $325 a week. Some context there.
Sorry, I'm juggling a few other questions here, but let me go back to the top. So here's actually an interesting question. Why waste management, overall decline in economic activity makes sense, but are households and businesses cutting service?
No, and most of that's not actually. If you had to drill into like the sort of more detailed industry list to see where the waste management losses were coming from, but from what we've heard, actually, there's going to be no cut to services as far as people having recycling or trash service stopped or anything like that, and people haven't been seeing any impacts on that end. What if you drill down, once again, it's very tiny, and I apologize for the list there. That category is mostly capturing administrative support and not the waste management side. So that's mostly employment services. So businesses that temp help services, employment services are the ones that are that we have most of those jobs in. Also travel arrangement, travel agents, et cetera, are listed under that category as well. And that's another one that we had as a group that was susceptible to immediate and severe impacts.
So a question from a standpoint, if a company asks staff to voluntarily take unpaid leave, would they qualify for unemployment insurance, or does it have to be designated as a furlough for the worker to be eligible?
Furlough or layoff, you qualify for unemployment insurance. That's a great question. I don't have the answer for that. I don't want to give people the wrong information. I would presume it's probably better off just to call it a layoff or a furlough. Asking people to voluntarily not work might still qualify you for unemployment. I'd have to follow up on that, but yeah, I'm not sure actually. I don't know why you would do it that way.
So a question from the bulletin, won't the federal unemployment amount reduce the state amount?
No, I believe it's additive. From my understanding, it's the federal number adds on top of the state number.
And then what is the processing time for jobless claims in Oregon or Central Oregon? And the business cuts hours. Okay, sorry, let's answer the first one. So what is the processing time for jobless claims in Oregon or Central Oregon?
Yeah, it's taking a while, and we apologize. I know there's a lot of frustration about how long the wait times are right now for trying to get into the call center. I just looked a couple minutes ago, and wait times were over an hour and a half. So it can be frustrating to try to get into the system if you're calling in. We've also had issues with the system going down on the online side because of the sheer volume of folks who are filing claims. And you saw that I posted at the beginning, we had over 76,000 initial claims filed last week. We only processed 23,000 of those. Now, only 23,000 is pretty impressive considering where we were the week before with the same number of staff. And now we've switched things around, really, like I said, diverted staff from other divisions into unemployment insurance to get these claims filed at a faster pace. So I don't have a good answer for actually how quickly they're being processed, but it's taking longer than it traditionally does. But want everyone to know that the agency is working on it as fast as they can.
So here's a question from given that undocumented Latinos and other undocumented folks are shut out of the unemployment benefit despite paying taxes, how is it tracking? Sorry, how is it tracking a loss of unemployment in these communities happening?
So we're going to track unemployment with our traditional measures when we get those. So we're going to have the unemployment rate, in 2 months we're going to have really good data as far as community level unemployment rates and what these unemployment insurance filings mean for the unemployment rate. We're not there yet though. The number of unemployed is far larger than the number of people on unemployment insurance because of those who don't qualify. So part of the answer to that is stay tuned on community by community impacts and what that means to the unemployment rate. We're still not sure. It could go high, and it likely will go very high, at least for a period of time, but I'm not willing to put a number on that yet. As far as folks who are undocumented, if they're a payroll worker, covered under unemployment insurance, they qualify whether or not they're a citizen or not. Details about sort of undocumented workers, I'd have to refer those to folks in our unemployment insurance division.
So this actually speaks into a little bit what you were just saying, but what do you think the unemployment percentage for Oregon compared to the national will peak at?
Yeah, like I said, I don't want to speculate too much on what the number's really going to be. We're going to be growing off of record low unemployment, that's for sure. I think in February, Oregon was at 3.3%, maybe 3.6 for top three off the top of my head. Very, very low rates of unemployment. We've been at these low rates of unemployment for a long period of time. So actually, in a weird way, thank goodness this happened at a period of such a long expansion. But it has the potential, based on these unemployment filing numbers we're seeing here, it definitely has the potential to go double digit on the unemployment rate.
As a business owner, when and if my employees file for unemployment, can my rate go up? I think we are currently pay 0.7% because of a good history. What might be the highest it can get?
Yeah, once again, that's going to be more specific to the unemployment insurance folks. But I think in this, the only recommendation I can have is don't worry about that. Let your folks file for unemployment. Likely isn't going to affect your rate this single layoff event. So really encourage folks to apply for unemployment insurance. And also, if you're a business, another great recommendation we have is before you let them go, before you lay them off, we're hearing folks are having issues having access to computers to file an online claim. So if you can allow your workers to use the resources at your business to file their claim before you let them go, that would be very helpful.
So here's a broad question. If you could take a moment and what do you see as longer term impacts to the economy and essential services, government, hospitals, medical providers, et cetera?
Yeah, the long term is, like I said, we look at these short term numbers and they're shocking and they're discouraging. And knowing that every single one of those claims filed was an Oregonian, your neighbor, it might have been you, that lost a job in the short run, and those numbers are only getting bigger. It's terrifying though if you look at the information of what we if we do nothing as far as the human health aspect as well. So we're stuck, what we like to say, between a rock and a hard space, and the only way out of this is to sort of wreck the economy short term. Now, as far as what the long term impacts are going to be, that sort of V-shaped versus U-shaped recovery conversation. And the hope is that it will be a V-shaped recovery. I think that it's going to take longer than many of us imagine to recover from this thing. Like I said, that sort of turning the light switch back of the labor market is really difficult. I think one thing that's going to really help is if businesses remain attached to their workers during this downtime. So you maintain contact with your workers, have their contact information available, let them know updates, et cetera, when you plan to start back up. If you could maintain contact with these folks, it's going to be a lot easier to restaff up and bring everyone back than if you sort of ignore them for 2 months and then hope to find them again somewhere out there in the labor market.
Can you speak to the work share program available to employers?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So WorkShare is a program that the employment department has. It actually uses unemployment insurance funds to help Businesses prevent layoff events. So if you think you have to lay off some workers, you really don't want to do it. You can use unemployment insurance funds to help subsidize some of the wages of those workers to keep them on longer. So there's information on our website. You just look up WorkShare under the Oregon Employment Department. You'll find details for that. But it's a really great program to keep folks on payrolls for businesses that are struggling to hang on. And it sounds like one of the federal programs that's being created with this new relief package is going to be similar to that, which is providing assistance or wage helping to pay some of the wages of the workers that for some of these businesses that are trying to divert a layoff event.
So here's sort of a positive shift on the economy right now. Are you seeing a hiring increase in healthcare to serve the surge in COVID patients and manufacturers producing PPE/ventilators?
We aren't yet. That's for sure. In fact, we're seeing, at least on the unemployment insurance claim filing data. I thought this was supposed to be a positive question.
Sorry, I thought it would be a positive. Sorry.
No, we're actually seeing claim filing happening from the healthcare side for unemployment insurance claims coming in from healthcare workers. But once again, that's mostly going to be that sort of ambulatory services as well as the dentist office across the state. Hospitals are definitely not letting people go right now. They're definitely staffed, ready to go. Whether or not they hire more if we have a huge surge in patients, I can't answer that specifically, but because we're seeing layoffs in other parts of healthcare, there's definitely nurses and doctors who are looking for work right now. So there might be a potential for that. The other industry you highlighted as well. What was that one?
The PPE/ventilator manufacturers.
Yeah, manufacturing. Yeah, we don't have any local manufacturers that produce PPE. One real cool shout out to some of our local distilleries that are actually switched to producing hand sanitizer, and I think they're giving it away for free, if I'm not mistaken. So some of the local manufacturing companies are responding and doing what they can, but we don't have any sort of local mask manufacturing or anything that happens locally.
So just to unpack that healthcare one, Damon, that the increase will not be greater than the decrease in the people that are basically out of, or you're thinking that it won't be the people that are basically now out of jobs, correct?
Yeah, likely. We'll likely see the decrease in healthcare be larger than the increase from the patient inflow of patients to hospitals.
Okay, maybe this is a positive one. Is this an opportunity to make a long-term shift in industry employment? For example, less service jobs from restaurants, but more people in healthcare and education. Seems like we have opportunity to repurpose part of our workforce to more meaningful industries. However, that requires a system in place, to train people with career transitions.
That's a great question. We actually see recessions are one of those pivot times that folks in the labor market tend to make career shifts like this. They might get laid off from a career. We saw a lot of construction workers in the last recession go back to school, train into a new career, and move on to another industry. I do want to say that this is at no fault to the leisure sector. Restaurants and hotels were not the reason why this is happening, and there is in fact meaningful work in the leisure and hospitality sector. I don't want to downplay the jobs that exist there, career opportunities. But yeah, I mean, it is, I suppose, an opportunity that if you were looking to pivot into a new career and you just lost your job, that this is you got some time on your hands to do some research, that's for sure. But once again, I want to reiterate that our local tourism economy is really important, both across the state and here in Central Oregon. It provides a lot of jobs. It provides a lot of meaningful jobs to quite a few people, even if they tend to be on lower paying. And it also is one of our biggest economic biggest economic development tools that we have. It is sort of an underplayed part of the quote that I shared from Josh Lehner is that the biggest long-term fear is the slowdown in population growth and in-migration that we might see. Because Oregon recovers quicker because of our ability to draw people to Oregon, just that inflow of people. And our tourism economy is one of the ways that we really attract people to come here locally. So there's a lot of really important benefits that tourism provide to us here locally. And I definitely don't want to downplay that. So any support we can give to them to bounce back is important.
So last question for you. If people go back to school for retraining and receive financial aid, does that affect their ability to collect unemployment?
If you go back to school and get retraining, no, there are programs available that you can stay on unemployment while in school. So that there's some sort of rules attached to that, and some specific some specific details that those individuals will have to work with the unemployment insurance department, unemployment insurance division on. But you can still qualify for unemployment if you're retooling or retraining.
So anything that you want to offer before we wrap up with Katie?
I just want to thank everyone for the time. I know this is discouraging. I know it's difficult to hear some of this information. If there are any further questions for me, please don't hesitate to call or email. My Twitter handle on my contact information there. I'm trying to push information as quickly as I can through Twitter, as things are changing so rapidly that it's sort of the fastest way to get information to the public. So contact me, please, if you have any questions, and keep your heads up. We'll get through this, but stay at home and keep watching TV.
Thank you, Damon. And let's kick it back over to you, Katie. I think you're muted, Katie. Katie, I think you're muted.
There we go.
There we go.
Guys, we knew we'd have at least one glitch today, and it was me. So, Damon, thanks for sharing that information. It was really great. And I know this is a rough time for your team. This is not a fun thing to sift through all this information when it's going in the wrong direction than you're used to. So we will have a follow-up survey. We'd love to know what you think of this information. Is there something we're missing? So it'll be coming to you shortly after we end today. Also wanted to share with you, Matt, if you could put the last slide up. There are a few opportunities coming up. Next week, we have planned the COVID-19 Central Oregon Health Update. We'll have health officials on sharing the latest numbers, what the impact is here, what the situation looks like in our hospitals and other places, and how the testing is going. We do want to say that we can pivot on a dime here. There will be a lot of new legislation to talk about next week. We should have the federal stimulus package should be done and through the House with any luck by the end of this week. And also next week, the state legislature convenes. They're expecting a special session. And there's a lot of discussion at the state level of immediate stimulus and assistance to people in Oregon. So a lot of information. We're working on getting some special speakers and information and different areas so that you can have access to the folks who know the answers to how you apply, who qualifies for what, and how much is available, and getting it to you directly through somebody who's got all the answers immediately. So stand by. We'll be getting information out and updating you on what the next Impact series will be focused on. But know that those are two areas we're monitoring closely and that we want to share with you. Let's see. So I guess that wraps it up for today. Really appreciate everyone's time. Remember, we are all in this together. The great thing about Bend and Central Oregon is how collaborative we are, and this is when the rubber hits the road on that stuff. So reach out, help each other out, stay home, be well, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.